The Interstellar Academy of Advanced Studies floated somewhere between 3-star systems, which was either a brilliant feat of engineering or an expensive way to avoid paying taxes to any single government. Probably both. The station housed approximately 40,000 students from 217.
According to YouTube analytics, 98% of viewers are not subscribed. That's a huge number. By subscribing the channel that is completely free, you'll help support the channel and never miss fresh content.
Different species, all of whom had passed rigorous entrance examinations, proving they could coexist without immediately trying to eat, absorb, or politically subjugate one another. Progress by galactic standards. Professor Velkrath stood at the front of Xenobiology 301, all 7 feet of crystalline exoskeleton gleaming under the carefully calibrated lighting that didn't give anyone seizures or existential dread. The professor belonged to the Gentari species, silicon-based life forms who communicated through precisely controlled light refraction, and had invented 3 separate branches of mathematics just to better argue with each other. They were, by general consensus, insufferably brilliant. The lecture hall curved in that universal amphitheater design that every civilization apparently invented independently, which either suggested something fundamental about physics and acoustics or a disappointing lack of architectural imagination across the cosmos. 200 students occupied the space, representing dozens of species, each sitting in specially designed accommodations. Some required liquid suspension, others needed gravity 3 times standard. A few existed partially out of phase with regular space-time and were frankly just showing off. "Survival," Professor Velkrath announced, their voice emanating from a translation matrix that made them sound perpetually disappointed, "is the foundation of evolution. This is not philosophy. This is mathematics." The professor's surface rippled with equations that looked like someone had taught calculus to have anxiety. Students frantically took notes, or telepathically recorded, or simply absorbed the information through whatever method their biology preferred. One student was literally photosynthesizing the lecture. Education had become wonderfully weird. "Every species in this room," the professor continued, light pulsing in emphasis, "originated on a world that tested them, shaped them, made them worthy of the stars." A 3-dimensional galactic map materialized above the lecture floor, spinning slowly, marked with thousands of homeworlds in various colors. But some worlds tested their children more harshly than others. A murmur rippled through the class. This was the good stuff, the comparative suffering that every species secretly loved to debate. "My planet was worse than yours. Therefore my people are tougher. Therefore I deserve extra credit and your parking spot." Professor Velkrath highlighted a cluster of worlds in angry red. "Deathworlds, Category 9 or above on the Environmental Hostility Index. Planets that don't merely challenge life, but actively attempt to murder it in creative ways." The professor's surface flickered with what might have been pride or indigestion. "I myself originate from a Class 7 world. Respectable, but not exceptional." A Fluvian student, basically an intelligent octopus who'd evolved in ammonia seas, raised 3 tentacles. "Professor, my homeworld has acid rain that can dissolve unprotected tissue in minutes." "Class 6, the professor responded, unimpressed. "Next." A chittering came from an insectoid Vresh in the back. "Our world has 6 distinct predator species that hunt in coordinated packs and possess venoms that can incapacitate organisms 50 times their size." "Class 7, adequate." Professor Velkrath's glow dimmed slightly. "But there exists one species in this galaxy whose homeworld makes all others look like vacation resorts for elderly diplomats. Every sensory organ in the room focused forward. Even the partially phased students fully manifested, not wanting to miss this. The Krath. The professor spoke the name like it meant something, which it did. The galactic map zoomed to a world labeled in pulsing crimson, the cartographic equivalent of a hazard warning. Their planet registers as a Category 12 Deathworld, the highest classification we have, because we literally couldn't imagine anything worse. A holographic Krath appeared above the map. They looked exactly like evolution's answer to the question, what if we made a nightmare, but bigger? Heavily armored, massively muscled, with redundant organs and a skeletal structure that could probably survive atmospheric re-entry. They'd evolved on a world with gravity twice galactic standard, an atmosphere that would poison most species, and predators that made the Vresh's coordinated hunters look like confused puppies. The Krath are, by any objective measure, the apex survivors of this galaxy. Professor Velkrath stated, 3 Krath students currently attend this institution, and they consistently dominate in every physical trial, every endurance test, every survival simulation we devise. This was true. Everyone knew it. The Krath were friendly enough, if you caught them in a good mood, and didn't accidentally challenge their honor by breathing wrong, but they were built for a world that wanted them dead. They'd won that argument decisively. No other known species, the professor continued, and here their light took on an almost reverent quality, has conquered a more hostile environment. The Krath represent the absolute pinnacle of biological adaptation to extreme adversity. They are our only true Deathworlders. Students absorbed this information with the solemnity it deserved. The Krath were inspirational, terrifying, and conveniently confirmed what everyone believed about the natural hierarchy of toughness in the galaxy. Nice when the universe provided clear categories. This is why, Professor Velkrath said, pulling up another series of equations that looked like they were personally offended by reality. We study their biology, their evolution, their adaptation mechanisms. If we can understand how life persists in the most hostile possible environment, we can understand the fundamental limits of organic existence. The lecture continued with detailed analysis of Krath cardiovascular systems, their ridiculous immune responses, their ability to survive injuries that would liquefy most species. It was fascinating in that morbid way that made you grateful your ancestors had evolved somewhere sensible. Near the back of the lecture hall, in a section designed for species requiring standard oxygen-nitrogen atmosphere and comfortable one-gravity conditions, a student sat taking notes on a primitive electronic tablet. They'd been quiet throughout the lecture, which wasn't unusual. The student often seemed content to observe, absorb, and occasionally ask questions that revealed they'd actually done the reading. Unlike 90% of their classmates, the student was bipedal, bilaterally symmetrical, with minimal natural armor and no obvious weapons. Soft-skinned, relatively small, with binocular vision and opposable thumbs. They looked, frankly, like they should be worried about getting stepped on in crowded hallways. Their homeworld designation in the Academy Registry listed them as coming from a Class 2 environment, practically a paradise world. Garden-variety civilization that had figured out spaceflight through steady, unremarkable development. Professor Velkrath was wrapping up, their surface displaying complex charts comparing Deathworld classifications. So when we discuss survival, when we discuss adaptation, when we discuss which species have truly earned their place among the stars through hardship, we must acknowledge the Krath stand alone. No other race can claim. A hand raised, small, 5-fingered, attached to the unremarkable student in the back. The professor's light flickered in acknowledgement. Yes. A question? The student's voice came clear through the translation matrix, calm and genuinely curious. Professor, I don't mean to contradict, but has the Krath homeworld been definitively confirmed as the most hostile inhabited world in the galaxy? Professor Velkrath's surface rippled with what experienced students recognized as academic pleasure, a challenge, an opportunity to educate. The Environmental Hostility Index is quite comprehensive. We've surveyed approximately 87% of inhabited systems. The Krath homeworld remains unmatched. The student nodded slowly, still holding that tablet, still looking polite and engaged. Has anyone ever evaluated Earth? Every translator in the room processed the word simultaneously, finding it in their databases, cross-referencing. The galactic map automatically highlighted a small yellow star in an unfashionable arm of the galaxy. A blue-green world appeared, rotating peacefully, looking about as threatening as a decorative aquarium. Professor Velkrath's light patterns conveyed confusion mixed with gentle condescension. Earth, Class 2 environment. Your homeworld, yes? I'm familiar with it from your admission records. A pleasant world by all accounts. Stable climate, abundant resources, relatively peaceful development. Right, the student said, and something in their tone should have been a warning about that classification. Professor Velkrath's crystalline surface flickered with patterns that suggested mild amusement, the academic equivalent of patting a student on the head. The classification system is quite thorough. Perhaps you're simply proud of your homeworld. Understandable. We all possess certain biases regarding our origins. A few students made sounds that translated as polite laughter. The Fluvian student's tentacles waved in what might have been sympathy or mockery, difficult to distinguish with aquatic species. Let me clarify the Krath homeworld's credentials, the professor continued, pulling up a new holographic display that made several students instinctively lean away. Gravity, 2.3 standard. Atmospheric pressure, 3.1 standard. Average surface temperature varies between -40 and +60 Celsius, with minimal transition periods. The planet experiences what we call hyper-seasons, where climate shifts occur in spans of days rather than months. The hologram showed a Krath landscape that looked like several different apocalypses had gotten together for a collaboration. Volcanic activity in one region, frozen wastelands in another, all somehow existing on the same continent. Their evolution occurred, Professor Velkrath said, light pulsing with emphasis, in an environment hosting approximately 400 distinct apex predator species. Not prey animals that occasionally get dangerous. Apex predators, each one capable of killing and consuming a Krath adult. A collective shudder passed through students whose species actually possessed the biological capacity for shuddering. The Krath developed redundant cardiovascular systems, reinforced skeletal structures, distributed neural networks allowing them to remain conscious even with catastrophic head trauma, and an immune system so aggressive it occasionally attacks their own beneficial bacteria just to stay sharp. The student from the back remained quiet, still holding that tablet, expression neutral. Their homeworld's rotation creates gravitational anomalies that cause localized time dilation. The professor continued, really getting into it now, meaning young Krath must learn to navigate environments where time literally moves at different speeds, depending on elevation. Their primary moon's orbit is decaying, causing tidal forces that regularly reshape continental coastlines. Volcanic winter occurs approximately every 8 local years, forcing the entire biosphere into survival mode. Professor Velkrath's surface displayed something resembling pride. And yet the Krath not only survived, but thrived. They built civilizations. They developed technology. They reached the stars. This is what separates Deathworld species from others. Not merely survival, but triumph over conditions that would exterminate lesser life forms. A Threxian student, resembling an animated fern with anxiety issues, raised a frond nervously. "Professor, our world has carnivorous plants that can sense fear pheromones." "Category 4, the professor responded automatically. "Impressive botanical defenses, but hardly Deathworld classification. We also have regular solar flares that disrupt electronic signals. Category 5 at most, challenging but manageable with proper technology." The Threxian wilted, literally. Professor Velkrath turned back to address the full class. "You see, students, a true Deathworld doesn't merely possess dangerous elements. It possesses systematic, overlapping threats that create a constant state of existential crisis. The Krath homeworld exemplifies this perfectly. Remove any single threat, and it remains hostile. Remove 10 threats, and it's still trying to kill you. This is Category 12, classification." The holographic display shifted to show comparative data. Graphs, charts, threat assessments, color-coded in increasingly alarming shades of red. "No catalogued world surpasses this rating," the professor stated with absolute certainty. "We've established this through rigorous scientific analysis over centuries. The Environmental Hostility Index isn't arbitrary. It's mathematical, comprehensive, and consistently verified across galactic surveying teams." Students nodded, or made affirmative gestures, or telepathically agreed. The science was sound, the conclusion obvious. The professor's light turned back toward the human student. "So you see, while I'm certain your Earth has its challenges, the classification of Class 2 indicates a fundamentally hospitable environment. Pleasant gravity, stable atmosphere, moderate temperature ranges, likely minimal predator pressure. Nothing to be ashamed of. Civilization flourishes best in such conditions." The student's expression hadn't changed. Still polite, still calm, still holding that tablet like it contained something interesting. "Professor," they said quietly, "would you like me to describe Earth?" Something in the room's atmosphere shifted. Perhaps it was the way the question got asked. Not defensive, not argumentative, just offered, like someone suggesting they knew a good restaurant. Professor Velkrath's surface rippled with what experienced xenobiologists would recognize as curiosity, mixed with impending regret, if you wish, though I doubt it will alter the established classification. The student glanced down at their tablet, then back up. "Where should I start?" The student consulted their tablet with the casual air of someone reading a grocery list. "Well, Earth's gravity is one standard, but that's because we set the standard. Our atmospheric pressure is also baseline for most galactic measurements. We have oxygen at around 21%, which most species find comfortable." Professor Velkrath's light patterns conveyed satisfaction. "You see, a perfectly reasonable. The oxygen concentration used to be much higher." The student continued, tone unchanged. "Back when we had insects the size of your average shuttlecraft, they couldn't survive in our current atmosphere. Too little oxygen, they all suffocated during a mass extinction event." Several students shifted uncomfortably. The professor's glow dimmed slightly. "Our planet has experienced 5 major mass extinction events that we know of. The worst one killed roughly 96% of all species. The most recent one was caused by a rock falling from space, which killed all our large, dominant life forms and blocked out the sun for years. A Vresh student's antenna twitched nervously. That seems unfortunate. We live on a planet, the student said, scrolling through their notes, where the ground randomly opens up and swallows cities. We call them earthquakes and sinkholes. Our continental plates float on liquid rock and occasionally decide to rearrange themselves. Mountains grow, valleys form, entire landscapes reshape without warning. Professor Velcrath's surface flickered. Tectonic activity is common on many. We have approximately 1,500 active volcanoes. One of them, if it erupts, could trigger a global winter that would collapse our entire civilization. We know where it is. We built tourist attractions on top of it. The Threxian student made a sound like wind through distressed leaves. Our weather, the student continued, still perfectly calm, includes rotating columns of air that reach wind speeds over 300 kilometers per hour. They form spontaneously, destroy everything in their path, and we can barely predict them hours in advance. We call them tornadoes. We have a season for them. We also have hurricanes, which are larger rotating storm systems that can be the size of small countries, and tsunamis, which are walls of water now as buildings that erase coastal cities, and blizzards that bury entire regions, and droughts that turn fertile land into dust, and floods that reshape rivers. A student from a peaceful garden world made a whimpering sound through their translator. The temperature ranges, the student said, checking their tablet, vary from -90 Celsius to +70 Celsius depending on location and season. Humans live in both extremes. We just wear different clothes. Professor Velcrath's glow had taken on an uncertain quality. The predator situation is surely minimal. We have apex predators in every major biome. Our oceans contain hunters with sensory systems that detect electrical impulses from heartbeats. Our land has pack hunters with endurance that exceeds most prey species. Our rivers have reptiles that can hold their breath for hours while waiting to ambush prey. Our forests have cats that can take down animals 5 times their size. The student paused, then added, "We domesticated some of the smaller cats. We keep them in our homes. They occasionally leave dead animals on our sleeping platforms as gifts." "But surely," the professor tried again, light patterns now showing definite concern, "your species didn't face these threats. Humans are persistence hunters. We evolved to chase prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. Our cooling system is so efficient, we can outlast almost any animal on the planet in sustained pursuit. We also throw objects with accuracy unmatched by any other species on our world. And we have enough intelligence to create weapons that compensate for our lack of natural armor." The lecture hall had gone very quiet. "Oh, and about 70% of our planet is covered in water containing salt concentrations that would dehydrate most terrestrial species. We can't drink it. It's everywhere, and we can't drink it. Our ancestors still decided to cross it in wooden boats before we invented proper technology." The student looked up from their tablet. "Should I continue?" Professor Velcrath's crystalline surface had developed patterns that experienced students recognized as existential confusion. "The classification system might need updating," the student offered helpfully, "because I haven't mentioned our microscopic threats yet. We coexist with billions of bacteria, viruses, fungi, and parasites. Most are harmless. Many are beneficial. Some can kill us in hours. We can't see them without technology, and they're everywhere." A liquid-based student made a sound like gargling horror. "Our own bodies," the student continued, consulting their tablet with academic interest, "regularly try to kill us. Cells mutate and become cancer. Our immune systems sometimes decide our own organs are enemies and attack them. Our appendix serves no current purpose, but can explode and cause fatal infections. We have wisdom teeth that grow incorrectly and must be surgically removed. Our spines are poorly designed for upright walking and cause chronic pain. The Fluvian student's tentacles had gone completely limp. Why would evolution do this? Evolution on Earth doesn't optimize for comfort, the student explained. It optimizes for survival and reproduction. If you live long enough to have offspring, evolution considers you a success, even if you spend the rest of your existence in pain. Professor Velkrath attempted to regain control of the lecture. Surely the Environmental Hostility Index accounts for. Our star regularly pelts us with radiation that causes cellular damage and cancer. We call it sunlight. We need it to produce essential vitamins, so we can't avoid it. We just accept that our own sun is slowly killing us. A student from a species that reproduced through budding made a sound like a small existential crisis. We also have weather phenomena called lightning, which is essentially our atmosphere generating massive electrical discharges randomly. It kills hundreds of us annually. We invented metal rods to attract it away from our buildings. We golf during thunderstorms. What? Asked the Vresh student weakly. Is golf? Recreation, the student answered. We have a lot of recreational activities that can kill us. We climb mountains where the air is too thin to breathe properly. We dive deep underwater where the pressure can collapse our lungs. We jump out of flying vehicles with fabric parachutes for entertainment. We strap wheels to our feet and slide down frozen mountains. We invented sports where we intentionally collide with each other at high speeds. The student scrolled further. Our planet also has regions where the ground is saturated with flammable gas that can ignite spontaneously. Deserts, where the temperature exceeds our survival limits. Jungles where every plant has evolved some chemical defense mechanism. Islands with volcanoes that are actively forming new land while destroying the old. Professor Velkrath's light had become a confused strobe. The biological diversity is trying to kill us. Yes, the student agreed. We have spiders with venom that causes necrosis, jellyfish with stings that stop hearts, plants that cause respiratory failure if you inhale their pollen, fish that contain toxins for which we have no antidote, snakes that can kill with a single bite, insects that carry diseases that have killed millions of us. The lecture hall had achieved a silence usually reserved for funerals or particularly awkward diplomatic incidents. We also, the student added, almost as an afterthought, are the only species on our planet that developed complex language, tool use, and abstract thought. Every other species with comparable intelligence went extinct. We're not sure why we survived, and they didn't. A brave student from a hive mind species managed to formulate a question. How do you manage psychologically? We invented concepts like optimism and dark humor, the student said. Also alcohol, which is technically a poison we consume recreationally because it makes us forget we live on a death world. Professor Velkrath's surface displayed equations that looked like they were having a breakdown. The index classification uses specific mathematical. Let me save you some time. The student interrupted gently. Earth's gravity is standard because we're average. Our atmospheric pressure is baseline because it's common. Our temperature range is moderate because we survived the extremes and built civilizations in the habitable zones. The index probably classified us as Class 2 because whoever did the survey assumed a planet that produced spacefaring civilization couldn't possibly be that hostile. The student glanced around the lecture hall. But here's the thing about humans. We didn't conquer Earth. We survived it. We're not apex predators because we're the strongest or fastest or most venomous. We're apex predators because we're stubborn, adaptable, and we hold grudges. A cat attacks us. We track cats for thousands of years until we domesticate them. Can't drink ocean water? We invent desalination. Volcano might explode. We monitor it and hope for the best while living right next to it because the soil is fertile. Professor Velcrath had gone completely dim, which for a light-based species was the equivalent of stunned silence. The Kraith homeworld sounds genuinely terrible, the student continued. Respect to them for surviving it. But they evolved specifically for those conditions. They're optimized for their environment. Humans aren't optimized for anything. We just refuse to die, and we're creative about solving problems, usually by making them worse first. The student smiled, which several species found disturbing because they'd never seen a human smile before and weren't sure if it was aggressive. We have a saying on Earth, whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. We have that saying because our planet spends a lot of time trying to kill us. A long pause followed. Students exchanged glances, telepathic comments, chemical signals of distress. Finally, a Krath student who'd been silent throughout the lecture spoke, their translator giving their voice a resonant quality. Your planet has 71% undrinkable water covering its surface. Give or take, the student confirmed, and you crossed it in wooden boats. Before we had proper boats, actually. Just logs tied together sometimes. The Krath student made a sound that didn't translate, but conveyed respect, mixed with disbelief. I withdraw my species' claim to exclusive Deathworld status. Professor Velcrath's surface finally stabilized into patterns suggesting reluctant acceptance. It appears our classification system requires significant revision. Happens, the student said sympathetically. Science is iterative. That's why we're all here, right? To learn new things and update our understanding. The professor's light flickered in what might have been appreciation or trauma. Class dismissed. I need to contact the Environmental Hostility Index Committee. This is going to require extensive documentation. Students filed out in unusual silence, many giving the human student a wide berth. The galaxy had just learned something unsettling about the pleasant-looking bipeds from that pretty blue world in the unfashionable arm of the spiral. As the lecture hall emptied, the human student packed up their tablet and prepared to leave. Just another day at the Interstellar Academy of Advanced Studies, where occasionally you discovered that the assumptions underlying your entire scientific framework were catastrophically incomplete. Turned out the galaxy had more than one kind of Deathworlder after all. Some just hid it better behind friendly smiles and business-casual attire. The galaxy learned something important that day. Assumptions make terrible science. The Krath remained impressive, certainly, but they'd evolved perfect adaptations for their specific nightmare. Humans, meanwhile, had evolved the biological equivalent of duct tape and sheer spite, then used it to colonize every hostile environment their planet offered. The Environmental Hostility Index got a comprehensive overhaul. Earth's classification jumped to Category 11, and Galactic universities added mandatory coursework titled, Why You Should Never Assume the Friendly Ones Are Harmless. Humanities recruitment posters practically wrote themselves. The tagline, Earth, we're not stuck here with danger. Danger's stuck here with us.